Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I want to go over the Maple Leafs playing down to their opponents, the defensive pairings, Austin Matthews, of course, and some other news and notes from their last couple of games. So we're going to start with Austin Matthews because to start with anything else would be stupid, but we're also not going to spend a whole ton of time on it. So after Matthews broke the Maple Leafs single-season franchise goal-scoring record on Thursday against the Dallas Stars, he adds number 57 and 58 against the Montreal Canadiens last night, scoring 51 goals in his last 50 games. And a lot of people were up in arms, because if you want to read the stat as 50 goals in your first 50 games, then Matthews doesn't belong here. The other four guys did it in their first 50 games, but that's not what the TSN graphic says. And a lot of people underneath this graphic replying to it on Twitter, I feel like they just didn't read the graphic. It says last 5 players with 50 plus goals in any 50-game span in a single season. We're not counting the last 5 games of last year and tacking it onto this year and saying he had 50 and 50. No, it's 50 goals in any 50-game span in the current season that we're in. And no one else has done it since 1995, 1996. My personal opinion is that 50 goals in 50 games is 50 goals in 50 games. If you want to go back to last season to count it as 50 goals in 50 games, go ahead. It's a remarkable accomplishment either way. But it's not just about the 50 goals in the 50 games. If we're looking at that 50-game stretch from Austin Matthews, he's also second in the NHL in points in all situations, having played 4 less games than Jonathan Huberdeau, and only 2 points separate them. And this is a guy who missed the first couple of games of this year and then started slow because he had wrist surgery. The thing that lets you shoot the puck needed to be surgically repaired coming into this season. If he started the year 100% healthy, we're talking about him possibly hitting 70 goals, never mind 60, and potentially winning both the Maurice Rocket Richard and the Art Ross Trophy. And what's so impressive about Austin Matthews this season is that he's doing it on both sides of the puck, playing up against the other team's best players all the time, where the Maple Leafs with him on the ice are obviously world-beating team offensively, but defensively as well, they've held their own. And that's really something that we've only been able to say the last couple of years for Austin Matthews. These are the numbers for 2019, 2020, and then last year in the All-Canadian division. This guy's taken his game to a new level, offensively, defensively, the last couple of seasons. The playoffs is that last thing, and please. I mentioned it off the top that I wanted to talk about the Maple Leafs playing down to their opponents, and Bob McKenzie on TSN 1050 the other day mentioned that management actually spoke to the players about this. And this isn't actually what they said, but I'd imagine the conversation going somewhat along the lines is, hey, why can't you beat Buffalo or Montreal, but you're absolutely beating the whatever out of the Boston Bruins, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Florida Panthers? And I'm not talking about the game they blew the 5-1 lead in. I'm talking about the game that they played against them the week before. And Bob basically saying here that the response from the players was, don't worry about it, we'll show up when it matters the most. And it is infuriating to see them lose games to Montreal and Buffalo, especially when you drive a couple hours out to Hamilton and sit in the freezing cold and watch them turn in the performance that they did. But games against Carolina, Tampa Bay, Florida, Boston, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, in the same span where they lose to Buffalo and Montreal, down the stretch heading into the playoffs, they beat them. They won all of those games. So if they're going to show up when it matters the most, game on, guys. I understand you can't show up for all 82, but just, it's frustrating. There's a little bit of frustration here. And just because they won a handful of games against some really good teams doesn't mean that I'm going to give this core or even management group more credit than what it deserves. But to their credit, the showing up when it matters thing, the Maple Leafs right now, as of April the 10th at 1:55 p.m., and I need to be that specific because people watching the video tomorrow or the next day or the day afterwards are going to look at the standings and say that I'm wrong or whatever. The Maple Leafs did a very sophisticated tally here. The Maple Leafs are 29-4 against teams who are currently in the playoffs. And if you want to exclude that horrendous start in October where Matthews wasn't even playing and then he was coming back from wrist surgery, they're 27-3. So against playoff teams this year, the Maple Leafs have taken care of business. I want to talk about 2 more things before we close off this video here. One being the defensive pairings, but I also want to talk about John Tavares and William Nylander playing on separate lines and what that could mean come playoff time for the team. Saturday night against the Montreal Canadiens, the Maple Leafs rolled out Muzzin, Brody, Giordano, Hall, Riley, Lyubushkin. And Lyubushkin sat out that game against the Florida Panthers, and we talked about that in the previous video, but Timothy Liljegren has been made a healthy scratch the last couple of games, and a lot of people were upset about that heading into the game against the Dallas Stars. And I sort of said, look, if he's hurt, if he's dealing with something, I can understand it. The Maple Leafs have 7 NHL defensemen right now. But then I saw some people phrase it a certain way, and then I thought about it a bit more, and I agree. The next couple of weeks heading into the playoffs are about having as many questions answered as you could possibly have answered for you. Because in the playoffs, you need to have options and you need to know what works. You can't just slap something together and hope that it works on the fly. So because we know Giordano and Liljegren work well together, well, I have some more questions for you. Is that Mark Giordano carrying Timothy Liljegren? Can Giordano just play with anyone? Can he be trusted with more responsibility? I don't know. These are all questions that I need answers to before we head into the playoffs against what it looks like is going to be a first-round matchup between either the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Boston Bruins. And in terms of the shot attempt share, the actual shots, the expected goals for, the scoring opportunities, the high-danger shot attempts, and their usage, Mark Giordano and Justin Hall in 2 games against teams who aren't necessarily the greatest offensively in terms of the Montreal Canadiens and the Dallas Stars, were just okay. But if we're looking at the numbers with Giordano and Liljegren together, and these are against teams like the Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning, they were awesome. So you got some questions off the board, and you got some answers in your back pocket. Good to know. If you're looking at the Maple Leafs defensively with both Mark Giordano and Timothy Liljegren out there, there's not a whole lot going on out there in terms of the heat map. And if you're looking at the guys that they're doing this against, it's guys like Sam Reinhart and Mason Marchment and Nikita Kucherov, who they've spent the majority of their ice time playing against. And it's not even just their defensive output, but it's offensively as well. The swing in how good the Maple Leafs are with these 2 guys on the ice is 65%. It's just unbelievable. This is a pairing for me in this year's playoffs. Compared to Mark Giordano and Justin Hall, and you're seeing a lot going on in front of the Maple Leafs net here. There are some good players here, but Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin aren't what they used to be. And offensively, it's not the best. Jake Muzzin has played the last couple of games paired next to TJ Brodie, and this was something that we were talking about in and around the trade deadline and afterwards. We said, hey, it may be easier to find a new D partner to play with Morgan Rielly than what it would be to find someone to play with Jake Muzzin to help him with what he's struggled with this season, and that's making plays with the puck and carrying it. And then you get Morgan Rielly and Ilya Lyubushkin to develop some chemistry and produce good results, and all of a sudden, that frees up TJ Brodie to be a problem solver elsewhere on that Maple Leafs blue line. And I'm not saying that TJ Brodie's been carrying Jake Muzzin the last couple of games, but in the game against the Montreal Canadiens last night, Jake Muzzin played the majority of his minutes at 5-on-5 up against guys like Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki and dominated in terms of the shot attempts, the actual shots, the expected goals, and the scoring opportunities. That's really encouraging to see from a guy who's coming back from back-to-back concussions, and we spoke about the decision to throw him in there against the Florida Panthers. The overall numbers weren't the greatest, but then again, him and Hall together haven't played well all season long, and both players have been better away from each other. So the pairing of them together was bad, but Jake Muzzin scored in that game, and I thought that on his own, he really wasn't that bad. I thought that he treaded water against the best offensive team in the NHL, and for his first game back in almost 2 months, that's a huge confidence boost for a guy who talked about being hesitant to play the game that he needs to in order to be successful. It's not just coming back from the concussion, it's that confidence that he needs as well. And he treaded water, like we said, against the best offensive team in the NHL. So I'm locking in my answer. We're a couple of weeks away from the playoffs here, but if the playoffs started today or tomorrow, my defensive pairings for round 1, game 1, would be Morgan Rielly, Ilya Lyubushkin, Jake Muzzin, TJ Brodie, Mark Giordano, Timothy Liljegren. And then the Maple Leafs have Rasmus Sandin and Justin Hall as fill-ins for them. And last year and the year before that, when Jake Muzzin went down with an injury, it was Travis Sturman and Martin Marincin filling in their top 4 for them. So to say that, oh, how can you put this guy in the lineup over Sandin, or Justin Hall's not been the problem this year, or whatever opinion you want to have. They have 8 awesome defensemen, and they have a lot of options at their disposal. and they may continue to experiment over the next couple of weeks, but those are my D pairings. John Tavares and William Nylander playing together this season in terms of their underlying numbers, the shot attempt share, the actual shots, the expected goals, the scoring opportunities, the high danger shot attempt share, they're dominating. All of them. But we showed this stat a couple of weeks ago in a video that when John Tavares and William Nylander are on the ice together at 5-on-5 over the last 3 seasons, the Maple Leafs have 78 goals for and 78 goals against. That's just not good enough. And whether that's because these two guys just don't have chemistry together, or it's because they've had a carousel of wingers playing next to them, and you need somebody on the other side of William Nylander to take advantage of the opportunities that he gets off the rush, because Tavares is not the quickest guy, but that's been the rap on him ever since he was drafted in 2009, I believe. Skating was always a concern for him, and he's always found a way to be effective in the NHL. But the fact that 78 goals for, 78 goals against in secondary matchups, it's just not good enough. A couple of videos ago, I asked Sheldon Keefe to be the change that he wanted to see in this world. You know, you call out William Nylander 1-2 times in the span of 2 or 3 weeks for the same thing. You know, just split these guys up. And someone else pointed this out on Twitter, but I had to see it to believe it for myself. But Tavares and Mikheyev playing together this year, with the most common third member of that line being Alex Kerfoot, have absolutely ripped up the offensive zone together. Now, mind you, Ilya Mikheyev, after going on an absolute heater for a couple of weeks there after the trade deadline, has kind of come back down to earth over the last couple of games. There's been some high danger scoring opportunities that have died on his stick, but hey, if it continues to work and it continues to produce quality scoring opportunities like it has, roll with it. Roll with it. Because between Tavares and Nylander, the swing offensively and defensively was 28% here, but the swing for the Maple Leafs with Mikheyev and Tavares on the ice is 59%. Just keep going with it. And if we're looking at William Nylander playing with David Kampf, most of the time the third guy there is Pierre Engvall. Offensively, it's not good. Defensively, it's pretty good, but they're about breaking even. I would like to see a different combination there. I know that Kerfoot is the third most common member on that line with Tavares and Mikheyev, but I wonder if there's a combination that the Maple Leafs could get to that they could play Alex Kerfoot at center with William Nylander like they did in the playoffs last year, and Kerfoot had 6 points in 7 games, Nylander had 5 goals and 8 points in 7 games. Maybe it comes from a guy like Colin Blackwell getting an opportunity to play higher up in the lineup. I'm just not sure. Ondrej Kase has kind of been forgotten about over the last couple of weeks. I mean, I don't know what the timetable on his return is, but if he does come back at all this season, maybe he's a guy that can help you work in that combination. Could something like this work? I mean, I don't know. I'm more so just asking a question. You could flip-flop Ondrej Kase and Colin Blackwell, maybe. I mean, Blackwell played a defensive role for the Seattle Kraken this season, but last year with the New York Rangers, he was on pace for 21 goals, being the third member on a line with Artemi Panarin and Ryan Strome, I believe. So he has more to give, and I've really liked his game the last little while. I don't know. Like I said, I'm more so just asking a question. This would also involve having no Wayne Simmons or Kyle Clifford in the lineup. And if you're playing against the Boston Bruins in the first round, the game that they played against them a couple of weeks ago, that was one of the most physical games of the entire year. Kyle Clifford was in for it, but Wayne Simmons wasn't. Maybe you'd like a little bit more jam in there, just to keep the pace there. And the Maple Leafs have done a better job of that the last little while, but not with both of those guys out of the lineup. The last thing that I want to make mention of is Matthew Knies. On the 32 Thoughts segment of the broadcast yesterday, Elliot Friedman said that he was leaning more towards going back to college next year, saying that there's unfinished business and that his team has a real shot to win the NCAA championship next year. But there was also a rumor going around, I couldn't find the radio clip to actually listen to it, that the Maple Leafs are really trying hard to get this guy signed to a deal so that they can play him in games now and potentially even in the playoffs. And I don't want to put any pressure on the kid. He is just 19 years old. They did just draft him in the second round last year, but he is over 6'3" and over 200 pounds, and he does play a power forward style of game at the college level. Throws massive hits, has a real quick, very effective shot. If there were to be a redraft, I can't imagine that he slips out of the top 15 in a draft, and the Maple Leafs got him, I believe, at like 57th or something like that. Again, I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but apparently the Maple Leafs are pushing really hard for this to happen. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But that's going to be it for the video, guys. So make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, I'll see you in the next one.